Okay, guys, it's just turned 4:32, so you're very welcome to this evening's webinar. My name is Michael Kerry. I'm a physical education teacher, currently seconded from Glanmire Community College in Cork to Junior Cycle for Teachers, and I'm working as the team leader in physical education and also as a regional team leader for whole school CPD and support. You're very welcome to this webinar. It's very positive that we have so many registrants, and I think this is a very timely webinar and of interest to practicing teachers, student teachers, and we've had an awful lot of interest from the third level institutes and across the support service as well. So we've got 527 registrants today, and it's great to see such a number joining us. Two things of support that my colleague Amy Cotter is adding to our link at the moment. She's adding a link to a Padlet and also a link to a CPD booklet, and you can see them both on screen. I would advise everyone to have a pen and paper close to hand as well, because there might be something that stands out that you might want to come back to at another point in time as well. Okay, so I would always advise when you're engaging in online lists, maybe to have a pen and paper to hand. Okay, so you're very welcome, and I'm about to kick off. So, tá fáilte fé Rowan show. Most of you are after a long, challenging day of supporting students as they learn from home. I want to thank people for the contributions ahead of time. I'm conscious that some people have got a lot of pressures themselves at home at the moment, and I'm delighted that you can join us, and I hope that this is of some support to you. I also know that others are giving a lot of consideration in terms of assessment and reporting currently, given our new context. So I know that a number of our contributors this evening will definitely support you in that. So I hope that there's something for everyone, because people's contexts and experiences vary hugely just at the moment, and I'm very conscious of that. So I do want to thank you for joining us, and I hope that the next hour is of good support. The focus of the webinar is student goal setting and student reflection. So sometimes physical activity happens or it's set, but there might not be learning attached. So I think the two things that we're going to focus on are goal setting and reflection on physical activity and indeed physical education during this challenging time. And I'm delighted to be joined with groups of teachers. So the first three teachers that are going to speak as we progress are from St. Kevin's Community College, Dunlavin, County Wicklow. That's Méabh Corr. We have Anna Nolan from Creagh College in Gorey, County Wexford speaking. Gary Goldrick from College of the Immaculate Conception in Summerhill in Sligo. Anna Murphy is joining us from Causeway Comprehensive School. We have Brian O'Reilly from Tullow Community School in Carlow. We have Méabh is joining us from Skibbereen Community School, and Daniel Clifford is joining us from Cork Educate Together Secondary School. So their contributions are going to be significant, but I think that the real contributors to this is going to be you, because we have an interactive Padlet that's going to be of support to us during and indeed after the event. So I hope that you'll be able to contribute to that as we progress, and many would have received a link to that during the day. So we're working via Zoom, so that's going to be our main platform. You have the opportunity to pose questions during it, and you should see a lot of the basic functions, not as many as a meeting, but the basic functions for a webinar along your toolbar. If you're accessing Zoom from a tablet, you just tap on the screen and the toolbar will appear at the base of your screen. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time there in looking through that. We're also using the Padlet, so I'm just going to give you a quick look to the Padlet there, and we can see that we've got a number of columns in it. A number are very generic questions, so I think in A, J, and K, we've got generic questions. But in terms of columns B, C, D, they relate very much to our speakers. So as we progress, you might want to ask a question of them, or add a comment, or even drop a resource for something similar that you might be doing in your school. And thanks very much to those people that have contributed to that already. The link is within the chat. So again, if you do want to access that, it's being dropped into your chat as we progress. Okay, and thanks very much there, Amy, for adding that to everyone. So I'm joined here by my colleague, Amy Cotter as well. So our learning intentions, there's three. We're going to examine very briefly a number 3 current developments in curriculum assessment and reporting in physical education. So we've got a bit of an overview to start, And then we're going to have a level of engagement through sharing and exploring approaches, as I said, to goal setting and reflection, which can support learning. And we're going to consider and share what might be appropriate for learners in your school context. Okay, so we'll start with a few updates. The first key update, we were delighted from nearly 2 weeks ago, it was Thursday the 11th, I think, we began our JCT cluster CPD. And as always, a full day physical education workshop is available for physical education teachers. So it's available to all teachers. Registration happens via your school. So maybe check in with your school management or your teacher that might have management resource hours for junior cycle within your school. And as you can see, we've got quite a varied day, looking at teaching and learning in the social distance context, looking at assessment that supports learning, just like tonight, and with a key focus on effective reporting on physical education at junior cycle. So a number of people here in the webinar would have joined that already, and I'm glad to say that they're finding it extremely beneficial. So thanks for attending, and thanks for your very positive feedback on it. The second update is a very welcome development. The NCC have been requested by the Department of Education to begin the process of preparing a 135-hour programme for physical education over the remainder of this academic year, between here and June. Consultation is going to be a key feature, and the consultation process began last week. So information there, information as to the background paper and the brief and detail of the consultation is available, and a link to that is also within your booklet. And this first phase of consultation will be running until Friday the 12th of February. So that's the second update. And our third one is a significant one, because there is the opportunity, in fact, the expectation that students can profile their learning in physical education as part of the wellbeing programme on the JCPA. So the JCPA, as you probably know, is very much a composite document. When I did my junior certificate, it was quite a narrow focus. It was very much a summative exams. So the junior cycle profile of achievement captures a lot of learning across the 3 years, especially second year and third year of junior cycle. So it looks at assessments that might take place during and over the year 2 and year 3. So we'll be looking at that in just a little short while, how it captures classroom-based assessments, how it allows student voice to enter the profile as well. So the Circular 76/2020 stated that wellbeing will be reported on the profile of achievement for the first time for our current third year cohort. It will show in a separate area. In this area, physical education will be reported on under wellbeing along with CSPE and SPHE. This will be facilitated for all students by the use of the descriptors which have already been developed. They are exceptional, above expectation, in line with expectation, and yet to meet expectation. And they reflect the appropriate language of learning in terms of those assessments. And the wellbeing area of the JCPA will also include a free text space where schools can report on achievement and wellbeing in other areas. So that free text space isn't designed specifically for PE, it's designed for wellbeing in other areas. But schools have huge autonomy in terms of what they include in there and how they gather it and how they present it. Okay. So we'll look very much maybe at the descriptor, at the second paragraph here in a bit more detail. So the profile itself, it's caught, as you can see in the image next to us, state certified examination results in classroom-based assessments in subjects and short courses, other areas of learning, which can be very much a student-led comment as to what they're learning from participation and engagement in their junior cycle profile of achievement has been. For a certain cohort of students whose needs might be best met through a level 1 or a level 2 learning program, priority learning units will also be reported on for those students. And it's great that there's an educational as well as an assessment pathway for those students which wasn't here heretofore. But now from this year onwards, achievements in the area of well-being will also be reported on. So hopefully this visual representation is of support to you. So looking through our profile in general, we can see that well-being is being reported on here, and you can see the descriptors, and you can also see the free text area. So it will have as a default physical education listed, and the descriptor awarded will be one of the 4 there, as I've already mentioned. And you can see they are marked in green where physical education would appear. There are a number of curricular options at junior cycle. Each, there's an expectation would be reported upon. Our students would have a chance to report on their learning or profile their learning through a descriptor. So for this year especially, a lot of consideration needs to be given to how we would support that, both in the ongoing basis and especially now in the summative assessment activities, which we're speaking of. The majority of schools that we've encountered during our CPD are offering the first or the fourth option, either the NCCA developed short course in physical education with its associated guidelines for the classroom-based assessment, or the 2003 physical education syllabus. So maybe let's just have a look at the options in terms of a short course. A lot of support is there for you. The short course contains quite up-to-date assessment and reporting guidance, especially in terms of the descriptors. So the process is quite a straightforward one, and it's a 4-step process. So we can support our students in undertaking the classroom-based assessment, gather evidence of learning using the assessment advice outlined in the assessment guidelines. We can make a judgment of student achievement using the features of quality, which are also set out in the assessment guidelines. We can undertake the SLAR process, and then we can report on student achievement at the time or on the JCPA. So that's the journey we would take, and that's the update for reporting in terms of the junior cycle short course in physical education. The assessment guidelines contain different assessments. They contain features of quality, which essentially are assessment criteria by which we can make judgments of student work. And they also provide information regarding the SLAR meeting, the Subject Learning and Assessment Review meeting. And that's a supportive meeting because it allows us to enter into dialogue with our colleagues and kind of confirm our judgments or support our judgments. So that's the assessment guidelines, and they're a very supportive document when we're looking at allowing our students to profile their learning via descriptor. Just looking at maybe some of the assessments within it. From our CPD workshops to date, the Strand 1 classroom-based assessment is one which a lot of teachers are looking at when students are learning from home at the moment. So we might look at that through one or two of our teachers in a small little while. So that's really a standout one for some teachers and students that would really support meaningful learning during this challenging time. The Circular 76 also said that where students are not following the short course, the descriptor, so one of the 4 descriptors awarded by the teacher, should reflect the student's learning and achievement during the course of study. So in the context of the 2003 syllabus, for example, because it predates the framework, assessment and reporting guidance similar to that of the short course were not developed for it. So there's actually a 5-step process here. Schools would need to design an assessment based on the curricular document that's broadly aligned with level 3 of the National Framework of Qualifications. You'd also have to design associated success criteria to support you in making judgments with regard to that assessment. You would then support your students in undertaking that assessment and gathering evidence of their learning. You would make a judgment of student achievement using the success criteria which your school would have developed. Then you would engage in professional conversation similar to that of a SLAR meeting as a supportive and in some ways a protective factor to support your judgment. And then of course you would be in a position to report on student achievement at the time and on the JCPA. And there's a lot of detail regarding this included in your CPD booklet as well. So that was our update regarding reporting. We spend the evening session of our current cluster CPD day looking exactly at that. So I hope that the 3 updates we provided here on the cluster CPD, on the current NCCA consultation, and the update on reporting on PE as part of our junior cycle profile of achievement have been helpful. So now we're going to go to the meat of our evening, and it will be more interactive. So I just thanks for bearing with me throughout those few updates. So we're going to look at approaches to goal setting and reflection, and we're going to consider what might be most appropriate to learners in our context. The support documents that are hugely supportive of us, I'll just mention 2. This was a very welcome document in August. It was guidance for practical subjects in post-primary schools. And I think it makes reference to a few things that unfortunately have borne fruit this year. When planning for teaching, learning and assessment, the P department should review the subject specifications and identify learning that students are able to undertake remotely for students who are unable to attend school. So there's very much an onus on us to look at the teaching and especially the learning and assessment pathway for students currently. The second document, which is of significant support, was developed by the NCCA, and it was considerations for planning for junior cycle wellbeing. One page of this document, page 5, had a number of P-specific considerations, but I picked out two aspects that are very important for us right now, because students they've got a lot of particular needs at the moment. So a key aim of P is to facilitate students in being better able and more motivated to include regular physical activity in their lives. So you could say that despite and because of its associated challenges, this pandemic has provided many teachable moments for physical education, within physical education for our students. And a lot of learning is not just relevant, can actually be really applied to real life at the moment. And we have a number of resources in our support booklet this evening that I'll look through as the evening progresses. When we gathered here in May during our first bout of school closures, teachers identified a number of the learning needs. And I'll just look to three of them here. In the top left-hand corner, that they recognise the importance of physical activity in their overall health and know the minimum daily or weekly requirements. In the top right-hand corner, that they find meaning and joy through movement. And I think that's very important, that they find a sense of joy and meaning throughout it. And then the third piece here, which we'll look to later, is how can they gather evidence? How can they use data and feedback to help set meaningful goals? And a number of the strategies employed by our teachers will certainly help here. We have had 2 webinars to date, which have been hugely subscribed to again. One was during, as I mentioned, during our first bout of school closures, our first lockdown, we'll say, back in May of 2000. Amy Cotter, who's joining us today, David Gannon and Patrick Donnelly spoke about their efforts to promote student engagement at that stage. And I think we learned an awful lot from that lockdown. And then more recently, as we returned to school in October and September, Anya Farrelly, Ben McCormack and Denise Denson spoke of their experiences of choosing safe activities in the physically distanced classroom and considering what learning, assessment and reporting would be of value this year. Full detail of these webinars plus a link to each of the presenters is included within your CPD booklet. So we're going to turn to our Padlet. And if you haven't already, I might ask you to contribute to column A. And this is looking at what is your or your school's particular strength currently regarding supporting goal setting and our reflection. So it's really looking at those two areas, goal setting and reflection. And we're going to have a quick look to our Padlet just before we move on to hear from our other panelists this evening. So when I viewed this earlier, I was delighted to see Rachel Kelly. We met Rachel a few days ago in our cluster CPD. I might just pop down to Rachel's contribution here in a second. Here we go. Here we go. They're just being added. So Rachel's one was quite interesting as we saw it. So I'm just going to expand it if I can. So Rachel looked at physical activity, and a wellbeing diary is being kept for a 3-week period. The challenge is for students to get 30 minutes of physical activity per day for the 3 weeks. But as well as setting the task, he's asking students to provide evidence of it, photos and videos. And that school have created a Padlet wall, and that's great. It's very broader because there's drawing and baking activities as well. So Rachel, thanks very much. And you shared your Padlet link there. People may have to copy and paste it because I just don't think it's live there, but we might make it live just below that. So Rachel, I saw it earlier. So thanks very much for contributing that to our diary. And I'll just look to one more. Susan Byrne has joined us. And Susan, good to hear from you again. I'm just going to expand, if I can, Susan's post here. Susan has set up an app which tracks steps and it runs a steps competition with the school at the current moment. About 1/3 of students have signed up, so a good contribution rate there. Meeting times for PE are on timetable, and activity challenges are being assigned for students to complete, and they've got a physical activity record. So she's getting little evidence back. So Susan, I hope that some of the strategies here today in terms of gathering evidence will be of support to you. Okay, so thanks to Rachel and Susan. They were two that I looked at earlier. And as I scroll down, there's some really interesting things here that will be of use to us, not just during our event this evening, but certainly after it as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first set of teachers. We have Méabh Corr, who is teaching in St. Kevin's Community College in Dunlavin and Wicklow. Méabh is also a national executive member of the Physical Education Association of Ireland. Méabh will be our first speaker. And I might ask Méabh to just unmute as I introduce Anna Nolan from Creagh College in Gorey, and Gary Goldrick as well from the College of the Immaculate Conception in Sligo. So Méabh, if you're there, I might ask you to come in and maybe contribute to our piece now, please.
Yep. So hi everyone. As Mike said, I'm teaching in St. Kevin's Community College in Dunlavin, County Wicklow. It's a mixed DEIS school in a rural area, and we've approximately 700 students. And today I'm just going to briefly discuss two different events that we ran in our school, both during the lockdown last year and then when we were in school just before Christmas, that aimed to motivate students to engage in physical activity. So the two initiatives we did was a virtual sports week last May, and then a virtual around the world in 30 days challenge leading up to our Christmas holidays. So we felt our virtual sports week that we ran appealed to our students because it encouraged them to be active during the school closure in a fun way, and it increased their sense of involvement to the school community during a time when we were all apart. So on the next slide, we just have some evidence of the things we did in the sports week. So it was presented to students via our school's social media platforms, with 2 challenges being posted each day for a week. Each challenge was demonstrated by a teacher, and the students were then encouraged to try and beat that teacher's score or attempt. And at the end of the week, we posted a link to a Microsoft form, again on the school's social media pages, for students to upload their attempts to us. Our 6th-year students were very good to get involved in the challenges, and they really led by example for our younger year groups by engaging in a teacher dance-off and recreating a football video made by the male teachers. The students' engagement in activities could be seen from the attempts that were sent to us through the Microsoft forums, and it was a really nice way to motivate students to engage in fun activity and increase their sense of connectedness to the school while learning from home. And then the other initiative that we ran aimed to motivate students to engage in physical activity was a virtual walking or running challenge that we called Around the World in 30 Days. So for this challenge, each class group had to try walk or run as many kilometers as they could to purchase plane or train tickets to virtually travel around the world. The aim was to try and get back to school in 30 days, so just in time for the Christmas holidays. We again felt this would appeal to students as it was a broad challenge. Students could walk or run, and it was their decision how much or how little they did each week. We also had some teacher teams which were highly competitive. Students tracked all their activity using the app Strava, and each group had their own club on the app. Every Monday, our PE department would sit down and look through the various leaderboards. We would note all the class totals in an Excel sheet, and then student progress was updated in our canteen area, on social media, and in tutorial classes. Students worked in their tutorial groups to accumulate as much distance as they could, and this element of peer support and peer involvement really helped the students engage in the challenge. Each tutorial room had a printed map on the wall, like the one you can see there on the slide, where students would track their class progress. In the canteen then, there was a map for all year groups where classes could compare their position to others in the year. The friendly competition between class groups also added a lovely atmosphere to the school, with both students and teachers constantly discussing the challenge. During this current lockdown, we have tried to build on these previous challenges with 3 weekly challenges for students to try. So similar to our virtual sports week, our teachers are engaging in different activities, and their attempts are serving as examples for the students to try. We're running it by subject department, and students are encouraged to try beat the PE department, for example. One slight change we've made this time is that instead of Microsoft Forms as a means to collect students' data, we're trying to use OneNote instead, both through the collaboration space and in students' individual folders. While we're still in the early days of doing this, it seems to provide a much better platform for the students, as they can return to their work and reflect on what they have done, and they can also learn from each other. It provides more ownership to the students over their learning, and they can see clear progressions from week to week. We also send reminders to students about the challenges via our Microsoft Teams platform. And these are just two examples of initiatives that we've used and have found somewhat successful in motivating our students to engage in activity.
Méabh, thank you so much for your contribution there. And what I really liked about it was your last part, where you're looking at ways that students can actually reflect. Sometimes if we submit information through Microsoft Forms or via Teams, it's lost. Whereas I think the use of OneNote there and of a working page is something that students can go back to and reflect upon. So well done, Méabh, and thanks very much for that. Méabh, I'm delighted to see, Méabh, that you added some of those links to the Padlet page. So on column B, you've chosen a number. Now my view isn't great here now at the moment, but you've added a number of your pieces to it, and I think that other people are adding little bits and pieces as well as to what they can do. So if you've got a question for me, if you can feel free to post it there, but we'll have a bit of time maybe after Anna and after Gary have spoken as well. So Méabh, sincere thanks for preparing this, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you a bit later in the presentation as well. I'll move next to Anna Nolan from Creagh College in Gorey in Wexford. Anna, if you're there.
Hi Mike, yeah, I'm here.
Great, and off we go.
Hi everyone, as Mike introduced there, Anna Nolan is my name. I teach in Creagh College in Gorey, County Wexford. A bit of context, our school is a co-educational, multi-denominational school, and we were established in 2011. So we have approximately 900 students at the moment, and we've grown quite rapidly. We've been doing the PE short course with our students for the past 3 years, and we're also a phase 1 school for Leaving Cert PE as well. Today I'll just be sharing with you a simple kind of well-being and activity log that I've been using with my students since the beginning of this school closure. I've always felt that there's a big disparity when it comes to exercise and activity levels across our student body, and wanted to do something simple to promote healthy habits and awareness around these amongst the students during the lockdown. I was also cognizant that students are spending large amounts of time on screens currently, and I wanted to help to make the most of their screen-free time as well. I felt a wellbeing log like this will be the ideal way to capture students' habits and help them to reflect on their own practices. The wellbeing log asks students to track their sleep, exercise, nutrition, screen time interactions, and their downtime as well, as you can see it there. So the students chose to call this their chill time. In our first live class in January, we discussed the log and how students could use it. I created a Microsoft forum where students shared ideas of challenges and activities they could incorporate into their weekly activity schedule. We complete a live HIT class together weekly during PE class, as well as some of the challenges from Ireland's Fittest Family, and these act as a stimulus to motivate the students to be active for the rest of the week. Microsoft Teams is our platform of choice, and students submit their log into assignments on Teams at the end of their week. Students were given the flexibility to create their own log if they wished, or to use the template given. Some print them out and fill them in by hand, others have created PowerPoints and use that format. The majority use the template I shared, which is quite simple, and you can see it there on the screen. Some logs were quite basic, others went into more detail and were using this task to improve their behaviours and hold themselves accountable. For instance, some were trying to reduce screen time, make smarter food choices. All students participated in it and were encouraged to choose other activities from a shared school Padlet, which you'll see on the next slide. I've also shared that in the Padlet as well, so I think you can kind of, use some of the things from our Padlet as well if you wish. Each week, students were asked to reflect on what had went well for them during the week and to identify one area they could work on the following week. So we used the simple 2 stars, 1 wish approach, again keeping it nice and simple. Students completed CBAs in athletics earlier in the year, so they were already familiar with the process of setting SMART goals. We hope to incorporate this moving forward as they aim to improve a specific aspect of their log. The students gained great experience of reflection while completing their athletics CBAs, and although they're still a work in progress, they're becoming more competent practitioners and require less scaffolding and prompting questions. So I still decided to include some of the prompting questions to assist them with the reflection of these. You can see this in the assignment that was set up for them. I kept the reflection template short and simple, as it will be a recurring exercise each week. However, I am looking for ways to vary it from week to week. For example, I may ask them about exercise with their family at the moment, what supports them, what challenges them, how they may overcome some of these challenges or barriers to exercise as well. I might actually think I might ask them to do an audio reflection or a video reflection in time. And this variety might change things up, and the audio rather than written format may appeal to some students who struggle expressing themselves in the written format. I gave the students feedback on their 2 stars and a wish and gave some direction where necessary. I hope to include more peer feedback as well moving forward, so as to enable the students to learn from each other. When I see that a student has a strong reflection, I ask them to share aspects of this during our live class as well. So this allows students to learn from each other, and it affirms good work as well as motivating others to continue with their log as well. The simplicity of the 2 stars and 1 wish reflective method helped students to clearly identify an area they wanted to work on. We've also used medal and omission and recently glow and grow as methods to support reflection as well. We linked both the activity log and the reflection with the wellbeing indicators, which students are now very familiar with. They felt that they were definitely more aware after the process was completed. Some of them admitted they hadn't realised their sleep, activity levels or food choices needed work until they actually logged it, but it became apparent across the week, and some students noted patterns. Many noted that they felt connected to classmates and friends as they had made a good effort to stay in contact with each other. For many students, this formed part of their downtime or chill time, as we decided to call it. So there was a lot of FaceTime and Zoom calls and stuff like that.
So Anna, have you any kind of key learnings from your process as you bring it to a close? Yeah.
So I suppose, like many others, I found the last school closure quite overwhelming at times. So I wanted to come up with something that was simple and manageable, but meaningful to the students as well. So I keep the live HIT classes short, between maybe 20-25 minutes long, as I have multiple PE classes most days. I've tried to use Ireland's Fittest Family as a stimulus for some students, particularly my Monday junior groups after the show on a Sunday, and I feel this makes things more relevant to them. The school Padlet has also been excellent for encouraging students to try different activities across the week. I suppose I wanted to build on their skills and knowledge already that they've acquired during the CBAs in terms of setting SMART goals and reflecting, as this will stand to them in the future. And a lot of our students now are opting obviously for leaving Cert PE as well. I found breakout rooms brilliant for setting smaller specific tasks with lead questions, and it definitely helps with their engagement as well. But going forward, I'll be looking for opportunities for students to provide each other with meaningful feedback, as opposed to just me, and for students to share ideas to former live classes in the future, so they become more student-led.
Okay, Anna, that's great. I really like the fact that you're looking, like you have opportunities hopefully in live classes for students to share their experiences with each other as well. So I'm delighted that you're looking for, you're not the only expert in the room, they're actually experts with their own experience as well. So it's great to see that you're giving opportunities for them to maybe share. And sometimes schools find it helpful to ask maybe 4 students to reflect a week in advance and maybe be leaders. So it's actually, it's mirroring your Operation Transformation or for this family model there as well. And thank you so much for the time in preparing that. I know that you're adding some links as well to your area on the Padlet, and all those links will be there afterwards. So I just saw 1 or 2 comments come in. All the links that are shared tonight will be available. And if nothing is, just please get in touch with us. So thanks, Anna. And I'm now going to pass over to Gary Goldrick from Summerhill College in Sligo. So Gary, if you're there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Gary Goldrick, and I'm a PE teacher at Summerhill College in Sligo, which is an all-boys school with about 1,200 students. We have a PE department consisting of 5 teachers. Our school will pride itself on its PE and extracurricular programs, with activities ranging from competitive team sports like GA, soccer, basketball and rugby, to water activities like sailing, surfing and kayaking. I'm going to be talking to you about the use of the Strava app in a physical education context as a motivational tool for promoting traceable physical activity outside of school, and as an instrument to implement a personal physical activity portfolio as students are engaging in learning from home. I started using Strava earlier this month when our school was invited by Sligo Sports Partnership to take part in an inter-schools competition for staff and students called the Feel Good 5K Schools Strava Challenge. The project is part of a Sport Ireland initiative called Be Moved. The Feel Good 5K was established by our local officer in Sligo, Teresa Kilgallen, but could be ran in conjunction with or independent of your local sports partnership in any county. It could also easily be ran as an interclass competition in one school. On the next slide, I'm going to give you a brief overview of using Strava. Strava is like a Facebook for endurance athletes or fitness fanatics that track their training. You have a homepage and an activity feed where you can follow your friends' training. I have set up my PE classes as individual clubs. If I click clubs, I immediately see the last club or class opened. Here, I get the most recent activities completed by members of that group. If I tap it twice, I enter that club page. On a club page, there are a number of things that I can observe. Firstly, there is a weekly overview of the activities completed by this class. I can see that 29 activities had been completed, resulting in a total of 145 kilometers. If I wish to view the leaderboard, I could click in and see what member is leading in distance. This feature starts fresh each week. This allows students to be competitive each week, regardless of their performance in the previous week. Each week you could set a challenge. For example, the prize for week 1 may be for the most distance covered. The prize for week 2 could be for the most activities completed that week. In each group, I can post a message of encouragement or even schedule a run. If your school is sticking to their normal timetable, you could schedule a run during your normal class time. In each group, I can see each group member's activities completed. These activities can be walks, runs, cycles, or workouts. The Strava app will sync directly with certain wearable devices and upload automatically. After each activity, your students can gauge how hard they found it using Borg's rating of a perceived exertion within the app. We are using Strava in our school to undertake a remote fitness improvement plan with our second years. They will complete an online physical activity portfolio using Google Slides on Google Classroom. The portfolio is broken into 4 sections: fitness testing in several components, designing a training plan, implementing your training plan, retest and reflection. We use Strava in our unit of learning since Christmas for students to undertake the Cooper 12-minute run to measure their cardiorespiratory endurance. You can see the reading here gives an accurate and reliable record of the distance this student had ran in 12 minutes. This real data can then allow the student to set a SMART goal. The students analyze their result by comparing it to the normative data in their portfolio and answer a few questions. They set a goal. For example, I am going to improve my overall score in the Cooper 12-minute run by 300 meters from 2,400 meters to a score of 2,700 meters in a 5-week period. The students design their improvement training plan using FIT and SMART principles, which will be discussed in more detail later by Anna and Brian. To promote collaboration, we set small Google assignments in groups of 3 or 4 where the students can complete a group task that complements their improvement plan. Utilizing breakout room tasks or assigning training groups or buddies would be fantastic alternatives. Using Google Slides as an e-portfolio makes it easy to set the layout of each slide to clearly indicate where you want students to upload a photo or complete a written task. Students upload screenshots of Strava of their planned physical activity for that week. If they have a smartwatch or a Fitbit, they can sync it to Strava, which will record a HIIT session. The use of Strava promotes transparency. The students must have a screenshot of the app for an activity to be valid. Workout Producer is another great app to complement this. In section 3, students upload and input their physical activity. At the end of each training week, they reflect on the process by answering 4 simple questions. Did you complete all the training you had planned this week? Did you encounter any setbacks? Will you make any changes to the training plan for the next week? What was the hardest part about your training this week? On the next slide, we can see that each section of the e-portfolio can be placed in a shared area for editing. So you could place a 4-section slide of the e-portfolio, which would be 120 slides in total for 30 students, in one shared area for editing. The advantages of this are everything is the same place for you as a teacher. The students can learn from the experience of others. There is endless potential for feedback loops, be that peer, teacher, etc. This way allows the portfolio to be constructed in manageable sections each week by the students. After the 5-week intervention, the students will retest, analyse their data, and reflect on the process by answering reflective questions like, how would you describe your level of fitness before and after your programme? How did you deal with setbacks? What might you do differently next time? We will assess or make our judgment on the evidence gathered through the descriptors of the Strand 1 CBA personal physical activity programme using the features of quality from the assessment guidelines booklet. This will allow the students to profile their progress and achievement, but also allow us to provide meaningful feedback during and after the event. We look forward to discussing the evidence of learning and the approaches taken within other schools through the assessment review meetings later this year. Finally, I believe this to be a meaningful process for students. It's great to see the community of students and teachers centered around physical activity at such a challenging time. We look forward to developing this unit further in time for subsequent second-year groups based on the feedback from our current group. But Strava is proving motivating and effective. Thank you.
Gary, thank you very much for that. I'm really taken with the image in front of us here. You certainly made the process of you looking at student work afterwards very manageable here, because you could actually, as you said there, have all 30 students on one shared Microsoft Slides, Microsoft PowerPoint, online one, or Google Slides. So that's
Google Slides for us.
Google Slides in your case, and both students can add slides, and you can, as you said there, I think you said it causes endless feedback loops. So it's a very positive way of making a very manageable way of collecting of information. So Gary, thanks very much for your contribution there. I might, just at this stage, we've listened to 3 of our contributors and they've varied. And I know that Gary left his SMART goal setting there because Anna Murphy and Brian O'Reilly are speaking of it later. Maybe at this stage, it might be good maybe just for any one of Anna, of Méabh, or of Gary just there, maybe drop a question in, a question or a comment or a document or resource into their area, B, C, or D. Okay, so maybe if you want to pose a question, if you want to drop in a document or a resource for something that you're finding useful in your context, or even have a comment or pose a question, that would be great. So we'll just take a minute to do so. And it's great to see that Anna has dropped in her Padlet link there as well. Anna, I know there were a few requests for you to email on editable copies of that. I think it could be good just to drop them in here as well. That would mean everybody has access, and it would save you the effort there as well. But if you're happy to do that, some people are building on Méabh's comments as well. So guys, I'm just going to step up there. Gary has added his physical activity portfolio as well there, which is great. So that's great, Gary. If anybody has any questions there, I know that a few people are posting as we speak, but I'm actually going to just proceed for the moment to our second 2 groups of speakers. We're going from Kerry to Carlow. We've Anna Murphy in Causeway Comprehensive School in Kerry, and Brian O'Reilly also in the ACCS sector in Tullow Community School in County Carlow. So Anna, if you're there, I might ask you to come in, please.
Hi, Mike.
That's it. We can hear you loud and clear, Anna. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, so my name is Anna Murphy and I am a PE teacher in Causeway Comprehensive School. So our school is a mixed rural school catering for approximately 500 students in the North Kerry area. There is a huge emphasis on sport in the school, in particular hurling, camogie, basketball and football. So we felt that the Strand 1 CBA, the personal physical activity programme, would appeal to our students and would be meaningful for them because the majority of students have a big interest in sport and physical activity, but also because this CBA is quite attractive to the non-sporting students as it is very individualised. So the students are assessed on a range of the different components of fitness, including health-related components, which all students should aim to improve, along with the performance-related components, which would be of interest to the more athletic students. So the components of fitness that I have chosen are those that would benefit the athletic students' performance in sports once they do return to games, but also can be easily tested and improved by entry-level athletes and those carrying long-term injuries. So throughout my slides, you'll see that the tests that we plan to complete with our students are compliant with the COVID-19 restrictions, but they're also easily adaptable for at-home completion if required. So I started the CBA at the beginning of the remote learning period, and going forward, I will be considering how best to support my students' engagement over the coming weeks and give them the opportunity through a classroom-based assessment task to profile their achievement in this learning. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the components of fitness that we have chosen to assess along with a test for each. There are many of the other components to choose from and also a range of tests that teachers can use depending on their situation and whether the testing will be completed at home remotely by students or in school by teachers. So you can see on the right, there's an example of a testing record sheet that I will be providing my students with. And this is very simple and can be easily adapted to whatever test that you are using. Along with an introduction to the CBA, I have been teaching my students just about the components of fitness through the use of live classes, PowerPoints, and the Microsoft Teams breakout rooms have been very beneficial as well. So on the next slide, you can just see that I've described the tests that the students will be completing, and in class I've shown them short video clips of each. I have also included the normative data for each test to show students whether their results are average, above average, or below average for their age group. And in some cases there is no normative data for 14 to 16-year-olds, so this can be substituted with the class averages. I think this is definitely one of the most exciting parts for my students, as they can't wait to be tested and to see their results. I will also be stressing to my students that the fact that their results are individual and that the goal is to see an improvement in their own results after the completion of their 6-week personal activity program. So just on the next slide there, once the students have been tested, they will be choosing 2 components of fitness which they would like to improve through the use of their personal physical activity program in order to improve their physical fitness or their sporting performance. I have supported my students in their goal setting process so far by linking back to previous experience and the goals that they would have set in other units of learning. For example, we began our PE program at the start of the year with a couch to 5K for all junior cycle students, as we have a lot of outdoor space and we wanted to be out in the fresh air whilst using minimal equipment. So each group decided on a class goal, which was completing a 5K race around the school grounds in approximately 30 minutes within their own class time at the end of an 8-week block. So therefore, the students have already completed and reached a SMART goal for cardiovascular fitness. In order to create SMART goals for their CBA, I wanted to make sure that students fully understood what the term SMART meant, but also provide them with poor and good examples of goals. So in order for students to understand the importance and the benefits of goal setting, I created links to activities that they have already completed. So for example, the students have completed a unit in basketball and in hurling during PE. So I spoke to the students about the importance of power, for example, for jumping up to catch a slitter in hurling or a high ball in football, or jumping up to catch a rebound or a layup in basketball. So if this is an aspect of the game in which the student would like to work on to improve their overall performance, they could use the knowledge, the information, and the results gained from the vertical jump test to develop within their 6-week program. So this was quite relevant and relatable as well for many of my students who are part of underage county teams, because many of them have already created goals as part of their training, which they would like to improve on and achieve before returning back to sport, such as completing a 30-meter sprint in less than 5 seconds. So while many of these would be of interest to the more athletic students, I feel the components such as hand-eye coordination and reaction time are elements of training that would be more meaningful for the less sporty students, as they are quite general tests, but with practice, they could improve their participation rates in all types of games and activities covered in PE. Because I suppose if they can catch a tennis ball, they can catch a basketball, they can catch a rugby ball, a volleyball, and so on. So the next slide, you will see a few examples of teaching resources that I have used and that I will continue to use throughout the remote learning process. So the use of these resources will help the breakdown of the written element of the CBA for students into more manageable sections, while also encouraging engagement and collaboration. So I've already begun by setting small achievable tasks each week to complete, and I set these assignments on Teams. Here they can keep track of their work, but I can also provide them with individual feedback on their submissions. So for example, using the fishbone diagram to list exercises to enhance each component of fitness. Other useful resources include like spider diagrams, brainstorming, and diary entries. A diary entry would be a nice resource to use to help students to reflect on their supports they have at home or the barriers that they have to participation, because I suppose everyone's personal situation is different. And I'll also be providing my students with questions to help them reflect on their programs, such as what went well and why, and if you were to start the program again, what would you change? So another fantastic resource there is Mentimeter, and this is very beneficial during the remote learning period. This is an online platform that you can use to brainstorm ideas, question students, and get feedback from a class, along with many more features. So I use Mentimeter this week with my second years to discuss the supports that they have and the barriers that they may face during their program to participation in physical activity. And this worked really well, as all of the answers come back as anonymous, so they're not afraid to post, but at the same time, the whole class is collaborating. So finally, I suppose like any other subject, I'll be using the assessment guidelines as the CBA develops and the features of quality to provide a broad judgment to students on their work, but most importantly, to provide feedback as the weeks in lockdown progress. This is important learning for them, and they will also have a descriptor on their eventual junior cycle profile of achievement, and I feel it would be the most relevant out of any result that they get as they receive, as they'll be talking about taking positive steps to support their own health and well-being during these tough times. So thank you.
Anna, that's great. Thanks so much for contributing there. I really liked, you had lots of evidence of learning there that didn't involve images of students. So just in response to some of Natalie's questions there in the chat, you had a nice range of graphical organisers that were used to catch their engagement in physical activity. I also like the context that you were giving to testing. Okay, you weren't just testing for the sake of it. You actually provided a context, because you mentioned you were explaining the components ahead of time, so they knew exactly what they were testing and why they were doing it. And I love the relevance that you gave to other activities that they're involved in. I think you mentioned basketball, underage teams, and hurling as well there. So it's good to see hurling in North Kerry is alive and well. Moving to another hurling stronghold there, Anna, I'm going to pass over to Brian O'Reilly in Tullow Community School in County Carlow. So Brian, if you're there, it would be great.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Good evening, guys. As Mike has said, my name is Brian O'Reilly, and I'm teaching in Tullow Community School here in Carlow. A background to our school: we are a mixed secondary school with 725 students who come from many different sporting backgrounds. Traditionally, GAA would have been our main sport until Sean O'Brien came along, and then rugby became one of our main sports. We've been offering Leaving Cert PE now for the past 3 years as a Phase 1 school, and during this time, we in the PE department have learnt the importance of student understanding SMART goals. We've also felt that learning in the area of physical activity for health and well-being would appeal and be really relevant to the student, as it prepares them very well for the physical activity project in the Leaving Cert PE, which is worth 20%. It's a very good topic to cover during lockdown, as students leave little or no equipment, and with them spending so much time on the screen now, getting exercise on a regular basis is very crucial. You can see from my first slide there the SMART goal formula and the importance of that. Students conducted the fitness tests for the various different components of fitness that they wanted to do or were able to do at home. From this, we asked the students to pick the ones they were poor at and use the SMART principle to pick the 3 they wanted to improve. So you can see there an example of the fitness test results that a student did in Microsoft. They use the SMART method for each one and they post their goals to the Microsoft Teams page that we have for each class. I found that we needed to give the students a good example and a bad example of the goals, as some students' goals were too vague and sometimes too simple. For example, I want to improve my cardio fitness. Instead, we would have said, use the example to improve my bleep test score by 1.5 levels over the course of 6 weeks. This goal is very specific, it's measurable, it's realistic, it's timed, and it's very achievable. And again, some students said, I wanted to improve my flexibility. I said that we use that as an example of a goal that wasn't very smart. Instead, I want to improve my score on the sit and reach test by 3 centimeters over the next 6 weeks. The athletes and students with a good interest in sport and physical activity really took to these and set some great goals and were very keen to improve. However, as we know, not all students are performance athletes, and we're very happy to support the goals that were meaningful to all students. Therefore, some students who did not want to do performance goals, we asked them to use daily time, active steps per day, or distance per day. These appealed to the entry-level athlete and allowed families to get involved also. We explained that these goals still had to be smart and made them set a very specific goal, such as I want to increase my step count to 10,000 steps 5 days a week from its current 3,000. On slide 2, you can see in the lockdown that we're using Microsoft Teams and encouraging photos of the work to support student learning. We're also awarding plus points on VSware for work done, which is very welcome for the first and second years. Students must post photos on the Teams page for their own PE class of them training for their goal each week. We found this very useful, as other students could see the different ideas and the different ways of training and even get fresh ideas for their own target goals. Now, as the people have said in the chat there, you can see that it doesn't need to be a photo of you. It can be your step counter, your Google map showing where you went for your cycle, etc. From slide 3, you can see there's some screenshots of our PE department's Twitter page, which we set up in the last lockdown and has taken off very well. I did some of the fitness tests and put the videos up. Students could post to the Twitter page if they beat the teacher, they were awarded a prize. This really encouraged them to get involved and generate great interest with even the local radio station picking up. And you can see there in the first tweet that the KCLR 96 FM Garden Olympics, we as a PE department got involved and the radio station picked up on that and the school did very well in it. This encouraged all the students to get involved and generate great interest. After 3 weeks, we would update the students in how they're doing using the Microsoft Teams and point them to the features of quality for the CBA descriptors and ask them to check where they think they might be at in relation to these. The final one we want to look at is using the mixed component groups for students to support and learn from each other. And this was something I found very beneficial, particularly for students who might want to go on to Leaving Cert PE. A very useful strategy was to put the students into pairs, but they couldn't pick the same component. So my partner had to be someone who was training for something different. Each student designed a training plan for the other and coached them to reach their goal. This allowed the students to learn how to improve 2 components at the same time, their own and their partners, and the element of competition was great as they tried to set plans to improve each other's score. This is a time of great development in PE in Ireland, from the recently introduced senior cycle PE and the elective Leaving Cert PE syllabus. Developing a strong assessment culture that supports learning at junior cycle not only supports student engagement in and out of school at the time, but can also set good foundations for future learning in physical education and engagement in regular physical activity. The increased use of digital technology is a game changer in our environment, especially when it comes to LCPE. Our school has looked to developments as a means to raise the profile of PE in our school and to offer great opportunities and experiences of PE to our students. Can I thank you all for listening to me this evening?
Brian, thank you so much. That's a very powerful way to finish on there. I'm really taking yourself and Anna have given some very good steps around goal setting there, and especially using the smart technique. I'm looking at the clock. Things have gotten by in us a small bit, but out of fairness to our last 2 speakers, I'm hoping that we might be fresh when we return to them. So what I might ask everyone to do is maybe just get away from the laptop for a minute, maybe for a 3-minute quick stretch break, have a glass of water, maybe even step outside. So we'll see you back here in 3 minutes. So you're all very welcome back, everyone. I might just go back to our last slide. Brian O'Reilly's Twitter feed was very much highlighted in the earlier part of the year as well, because of the innovative orienteering work that his school were doing. So orienteering was proven to be a very, very safe activity to undertake during the physically distanced classroom. It was outside in the fresh air, and you could set individual or small group challenges as well. So well done, Brian, for that promotion. And it's clear to see that you're advocating very well, not only through social media, but all the advocacy is on the quality of the program that you're offering your students there. So well done. And I'd like to thank our last three speakers there. You can interact with Anna Murphy or Brian there through our Padlet page. So feel free again, either now or later, to drop in a resource. If you've got something that works really well in terms of goal setting in your school, it would be very good maybe to add it to that, because the more we add and the more we share, the more benefit it has for all. So thanks very much. I'm just going to drag across our document, and I might ask Amy just in a second maybe to drop that into the chat again. This document has been developed for use after today's workshop. So there's a couple of things in it, and I'm not going to go into too much detail with our acknowledgements here, but as well as the 7 schools that are presenting here, there were a number of other schools involved in a focus group just last week as well. And I'd like to thank them for their contribution. And a number of those were hosted by our JCT Physical Education Associate presenters. I'd also like to thank the DS Inspectorate and the Physical Education Association of Ireland for the contribution to this support. You can see that detail regarding the updates is available. The NCCA consultation, the reporting on physical education as part of the junior cycle is covered over 2 pages with your options for each curricular option. Our webinar series, which we looked to at the start of today's session, are all available here. So all of the contributions over our previous webinars are available. But I think most relevant to our CPD this evening is here. We've adapted a number of questions that could be of support to you in encouraging your students to reflect. Okay, so we've got them centered around the wellbeing indicators such as active, connected, and you can see here links to family, links to people in your community, those that might be involved in sports club but are unable to train with them at the moment. These could be really good questions to pose to students, but especially to pose during breakout rooms in online classes, because sometimes only through reflection does learning happen. And then of course we have resilient as well here in terms of coping strategies. And I know that this links very strongly to Anna Nolan's presentation earlier on as well, in terms of the broader well-being of students. We have 1 or 2 templates, and these, I will add this in word form. You should read reflection, of course. Reflection is a new term in my vocabulary. But we've got a sample approach to goal setting here that students could actually undertake at the start of the month, where they could check in the middle of the month, middle of February, and then of course reflect at the end of the month. And similarly, we've got a second approach here in terms of goal setting, maybe using the steps diagram in terms of goal setting, reflection, and end of year reflection, which students could do in a written format, in a video format, or indeed in an audio format. We've got some really helpful, the language of learning is always supportive in terms of supporting students. The language of the key skills in terms of being active. And I'm thinking very much back again to Anna Nolan's piece here, being healthy, physical and active, being safe, being spiritual, being confident and being positive about learning and life in general at this time. And of course, the indicators of well-being have some very supportive questions around learning as well. But specific to a personal physical activity program, specific to what many of our contributors have spoken to, we've got some questions that could be helpful at the start of a program. Not all of them, because that would be overkill, but a number of them at a midway point and at the end. And there's also a number of STEM sentences, which could be really helpful in considering. Many of these are taken from, as I mentioned earlier, the assessment guidelines for physical education, because reflection is a key part. In fact, formative assessment and development is a key part of the classroom-based assessment moment. I've also outlined in the document the task regarding strand 1 classroom-based assessment, which a number of our teachers have spoken to. So the task is set out in the assessment guidelines. So I've actually included a task here, but I've also included a number of adaptations for the when students are learning from home. So given the restrictions, and I think Brian alluded to this, for those students that may not, they may be inter-level physical activity participants, we might base our baseline on a daily step count or on the duration of time per day that they're engaged in moderate or vigorous physical activity. So I think sometimes as PE teachers, we're drawn very much to the testing, to physical components, whereas records of physical activity and involvement of physical activity can be a very good place as well. I've also added here in blue that students could be asked to provide feedback to others during online classes. So that could be a very useful addition if you were to adapt any aspect of this classroom-based assessment. So you've got the tasks set out there, which provides a good scaffold, but I think very importantly, you've got features of quality for exceptional, for above expectation, in line with expectation, and yet to meet expectation. So for a student to achieve in line with expectation, which is where you would expect the majority of students to be, would be having a program that's a reasonable profile, to have a range of strategies that address challenges. I've added this one, again, we have the flexibility to adapt these assessments, and I included this very much because we're providing a feedback loop with peers. So there could be the opportunity for a student to provide reasonable feedback, and then of course the feedback being of reasonable quality. And just on our last page then, I've got some of the very helpful links that might be helpful, including the PEI, the Active Schools flag, and others then as well throughout that are helpful in the physical activity community just right now. So hopefully that booklet, which I hope that Amy might just add one more time to our chat, is of use to you. So with that, hopefully that's useful after today's event. I hope that this last contribution from 2 Cork schools will be helpful during it. So we're going to turn to Méabh Lorden in Skibbereen Community School and Daniel Clifford in Cork Educate Together Secondary School. So Méabh, if I can turn to you first of all, please.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. As Michael has introduced, my name is Méabh Lorden and I'm a teacher in Skibbereen Community School. It's a mixed school with approximately 870 pupils. I suppose I've been leading learning in the physical education short course for 3 full years, and this is my 2nd year completing CBAs. And on both of those occasions, I facilitated my students in completing the CBA linked to strand 1 of the physical education short course, so the personal physical activity programme. Last year, my students began the CBA in school, but had to complete them at home due to the school closures, which resulted in a little bit of panic. And I had to support the students in completing their programme and showing evidence of their learning. So from that experience, I have learned an awful lot, most of which has helped and continued and contributed to many of the practices that I have today for my CBAs. So a few of the adaptations I have made are trying to move more of the CBA work online, and I use the Microsoft Suite to facilitate this. Other learnings I took were taking a more scaffolded approach for certain students by giving them a template to fill out for results, and giving them prompt questions for reflections, and then questions to complete at various stages of their CBA. So I use Teams and OneNote as the main forum for work and communication with my students. I didn't utilize it as much last year, but now it's proving to be one of the most useful tools that I have. I'm also hoping it will reduce the classic "I can't find it" or "I forgot my copy" that every teacher shudders at. I can set up the notebook specifically to meet the needs of my class. For example, I can set up a personal physical activity program tab where I allow students to show evidence of their progress and learning. I can give students a template. For example, I can give them a table to put in their health and fitness results. I can give them a booklet style document in which students can fill in, or I can completely leave it up to the students on how they wish to present their physical activity profile. So that tab for me in the class notebook becomes so much more of a working document in which students can add and edit their work. It also allows me to check in on student progress throughout the process without having me to ask them to send pictures or screenshots. And unfortunately, that was the approach I took last year, and I would not recommend. If you 4+ groups of CBAs, the messages, the chats and emails, it all just gets a little bit too much, not to mind all of the other class groups and the other subjects that you'd be teaching. So whereas with OneNote, I can go in, I can see the students' progress far easier. And then in terms of feedback, I like to give feedback to the students through the chat function as they get a notification of the message. Whereas if I was to give feedback from to them or give them to them on OneNote, I fear that they wouldn't really see it, and especially for the students who may need to be reminded, who may need that little bit of extra support. So I suppose how we support student goal setting, like what the other teachers have spoken about, is putting a big emphasis on their own personal development and their own health and fitness aspirations. We highlighted that it's a process-based activity, not all about who's the fittest, but who can grow, learn and reflect on their goals. If things weren't going so well for the students, we reiterated that it was okay and acceptable as long as they looked at the why it wasn't going so well and considered potential strategies then to move forward. So we got students to complete a small number of fitness challenges, ones that could also be completed at home. So these fitness challenges looked at various components of health-related and performance-related fitness. We were then completing we also had students who were completing their CBA and working from home. So an awful lot of these protocols were shared with them online, again through the Microsoft Teams forum. So the results from their challenges allowed them to see where the areas for improvement were. They then picked 3 areas to work on, and we supported the students in developing SMART goals and gave examples to students as to what a good or an effective SMART goal was. So in terms of setting motivational activities and trying to motivate students, it is quite difficult to do that online. In school, we'd consult students, we'd let them in charge of music for various activities, for circuits, we'd be allowing students to pick exercise to do for the class workout. We're also hoping that this can be done online. Getting students involved will be key to engagement and motivation. So we thought the students could share Spotify playlists, lists of songs to do the class workout to. So students can submit movements to contribute to a class circuit. So live lessons for me are working really, really well, and they're helping me keeping the students somewhat motivated. But it also gives me a clear image of who's attending. And you can really support the students then in using the notebook by going through the aspects of it and the nitty-gritty of it. It could also be used as a check-in time that may support activity outside of the classroom in the coming weeks. So during the school closure last year, I also set a lockdown logbook, which had loads in it from workout examples to facts about healthy eating, and then of course the physical activity logbook, where we got students to submit their physical activity each week. So with regard to the reflection aspect of it, and I'm hoping that you can see it there on the slides, the kind of a layout that we took. We used scaffolded questions, which we really did help probe the students into really reflecting and thinking about how they're getting on with their physical activity during this tough time. So I also asked my students to make note of any other things that they noticed, to jot them down either in their copies or make virtual notes of them. For example, were they sleeping better, possibly making a more conscious effort to try and get steps in, or maybe just noticing that noticing their activity levels even. We also looked at to see, like, would there be any key supports that the students could use, or was there anything that they noticed that could help and support others? And a lot of whom did make comments on how it was impacting other areas of their life. So a reflection tool that I didn't include in my CBA, but it is something that I do plan to include in the future, is the smiley face reflections. As basic as it is, it was really effective with the lockdown logbook. It's a really easy and quick visual reflection tool that worked well in this lockdown logbook. I'm also considering asking students to take photographs, snapshots of things that are supporting their physical activity during this time, and including these in their reflection and in their class notebook, and speak to the images. So this stimulus then would help students who find it hard to describe their journey in the written format. So I suppose the restrictions that were imposed in PE indirectly gave me another tool and another idea that I will use in this CBA one. This was the CBA buddy. So with social distancing and pods, we asked that students would buddy up so they wouldn't be mixing with too many other students in the class. This buddy system evolved and developed into students having a partner in which they could speak to about their CBA. It was a person that they were most likely friends before, as I allowed them to pick their own partners. Within reason, I did pair up people and put groups into groups of 3s and 4s. But I felt that when students were comfortable with the people that they were paired with, they were more inclined to work harder during their physical activity challenges, as they felt that they weren't being judged by anyone in the class on their results. And this would also help with motivating students during lockdown and remote learning, letting students work together and then possibly giving a 1 or a 2 line report at the end of each week on how they're getting on, that those students could be a support and a motivation to one another. And it was all of this then is facilitated through the Microsoft Teams form. And it just seems to be, at the moment anyway, fingers crossed, working well for us. Thank you.
Méabh, thanks so much. I really like the way that you're allowing the peer support to happen. I'm just going to flick forward maybe 2 slides here, because you know the principles of formative assessment that support us so well in class are as relevant here. So because you've actually created your peer groups, students are able to provide a lot of feedback to each other. You're not providing feedback from 1 teacher to 30. If they're in groups of 3, it's one teacher to 10, and feedback is actually being very meaningful there. But you're also activating students as resources for each other. So I think that's a very powerful use of formative assessment and a very clever use of Microsoft Teams and of your breakout rooms to do so. So well done on that. I'm going to step back to, sorry, wrong way. I'm going to step back to our last speaker, Daniel Clifford. And Daniel, thanks for being so patient with us. If you're happy there, you can proceed, please.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, thanks everyone. So thanks to Mike first and JCT for giving me the opportunity to present to you this evening. My name is Daniel Clifford and I teach in Cork Educate Together Secondary School, where we have a PE department of 2. Julia Hoyt and I teach all year groups. We're a new school going from 1st to 5th year, and obviously we're 5 years open. We've got 300 students as well, and we're a mixed school. We're currently developing a senior cycle PE program and adapting the current junior cycle program along with the CBAs. Currently we are in a temporary accommodation as well on Wellington Road in Cork City, and facilities for PE are extremely limited. We rent facilities in the Collins Barracks, the Glen Resource Centre, as well as a shared mindset. Myself and Julia allows students to have a meaningful learning experience as well. From September to November last, we facilitated our 2nd and 3rd year students in undertaking the classroom-based assessment, which are focused on a personal physical activity program. This is our 1st year completing strand 1. In previous years, we have completed gymnastics and athletics, and obviously there was a lot of preparation to complete before running the CBA. As we began the unit of learning, we explained that the learning and activities in class were ones that they could build on at home. We also shared with students that they would have an opportunity to demonstrate their learning and have it recognised on their eventual junior cycle profile of achievement. And this brought a nice level of focus to them and what was happening in class, and it made meaningful and purposeful learning for them. Students were supported in looking at safe and effective warm-up and cool-down activities, as well as appropriate dynamic and static stretching. We looked at their aspects of health-related and performance-related fitness. As well as the week progressed, we supported them in designing a basic physical activity program to improve their fitness in a particular component. And we selected 3 components of fitness, and they were the cardiovascular fitness, the muscular endurance, and the muscular strength. We also use, as you can see on the slides, we're an iPad school. So we use a platform called Schoology to upload videos, links that support students as well as assignments, and we've check-ins along the way in regards to discussion groups on there as well. This helped build on where we were looking at in class, and it gave clarity for students as they were completing their program at home, and gathered some evidence of their engagement, and allowed us to give feedback at various stages as well. As you can see then, we've got a 6-week template and we created that for our students. They found very, very useful to continue in a structured way to record their warm-up, their exercises, their cool downs, as well as reflecting during and after their lesson. And I have included that in the Padlet on the other pages as well. And on the right hand side, we've included questions as well when they've completed their overall reflection of their program. During the 6 weeks, we asked students to reflect obviously on each week and submit online. So this gave us an indication how they were progressing each week as well. And this had a massive impact on their quality of reflection as well. At the midway point, we gave feedback to students, and this supported their understanding of how they would be assessed and graded. And then we're just going to move on to the next slide, which is the evidence of learning. As you can see here, this is some detail that a student has filled in. So it's a little snapshot of the different ways in students demonstrated their learning and provided evidence of their learning. As you can see, students could keep a record of their physical activity diary, and some students reflected on their progress, their successes and the challenges that they faced. This is a booklet, as I said already, that Julie and I developed at the start of this CBA, and it really supported students to be responsible during their CBA. Moving on, then is the kind of review of the whole process. Kind of what went well for us is we found that the 6-week template supported students in a structured way, and for them to find out more information about physical activity, warm-ups, cool downs, etc. Some students really needed the support, and a scaffold of a template really helped, while others could be very, very creative and design their own programs in the way that this suited them. It provided us with feedback at the midway point, allowing students to enhance their approach further as their program continued. Using our online space was great for students to show their work and for us to provide feedback, and it was in one place. Any resource we uploaded to Schoology were useful for students to expand their knowledge and implement in their programs. Some opportunities, kind of looking back over the actual process, it was our first attempt and it was a little bit teacher-led, and students were very much doing their own program. Next year we would allow them for a lot more peer support and have students share more with each other in the class and what they were doing, and we could even introduce a buddy system. I think also we would introduce the language of physical fitness, like the components and the principles of training throughout first year in P, and it'll be more meaningful then going into second and third year. Then during lockdown and during the closures, currently we're allowing students to build on that experience of planning for physical activity and reflecting on their progress. We're using Padlet to provide further examples of activities. We've recorded some exercises that students can undertake, and we've introduced some fun sock challenges that are located on the Padlet that I've provided as well. However, a key feature is the evidence of learning we're allowing students to gather, be it a video recording of them undertaking a challenge or a short 30-second audio reflection after carrying out their daily physical activities. So this is the kind of areas that we were looking at this year.
Daniel, thanks so much for that. There's two things that stand out for me there. The first thing is how you're after undertaking this particular assessment, you feel students have got use of goal setting and are probably maybe better set to actually support themselves currently. But I love how you're looking back about the first year experience and maybe making, you know, flexibility more explicit in gymnastics or aerobic fitness more explicit in athletics as well, and actually principles of training more explicit there. I also like the fact that you're allowing students the creativity to develop their own template. And I think Anna Nolan mentioned it earlier as well. You know, I love templates, but for some people they're very limiting because people don't think in boxes like I do sometimes. They're very creative and graphical. So I love the fact that you're giving the you're providing a scaffold, but you're still allowing students to go left or right of that. So I think that's really strong. As I thank Daniel, I want to echo it for all of our speakers this evening. I think it's been great to share this experience, and I'd be very happy maybe to look at this again at another point in time as well. There is space to look at Daniel or to add comments or any questions to Daniel as well, and that Padlet will last. It will last long beyond us, so it will be there as a resource after today's meeting as well. I mentioned formative assessment, but I think that echoes very much across all of our 5 speakers. So at this stage, I just want to maybe really look to your take-home message. And your take-home message, to the best of my knowledge, is in column number K, okay? And we've already seen our school, Kieran Nefa in Clara and Offaly. They were actually with us yesterday for the online clusters. So they've got a wellbeing activity board. I think it was on Monday actually they were with us. And they shared that wellbeing activity board with all of our students. I might add that as a link here as well. So I think it's Jeff there in our school, Clara in Offaly, and his colleague whose name is just escaping me. But please do add to that, because the take-home messages are really what we want to hear from. So it would be great if people could contribute to that column K, either now or just directly after. Just two things. I want to say I hope that we have looked at a number of the updates and the current developments in curriculum, and it is a very exciting time for physical education at all levels. And I want to congratulate those teachers involved and also the supports that are being provided around it. We've had a huge chance to share and explore approaches to goal setting and reflection. That's the key. That's what will support learning. You know, not just setting physical activity, but getting students to engage in thought, in thinking around it, in goal setting and reflection. And we've seen a number of very efficient and manageable supports hopefully today. And then of course, considering what might be appropriate in your own context. Just before we finish, we have our mailing list, but I'll send that through in a follow-up email. I just want to turn to Méabh Corr, because seeing as we have her online, as a current national executive member, there were one or two things, Méabh, that I hope that you might update the teachers here, many of whom are members of the PAI of Méabh.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So just two things really. We have been working behind the scenes, so people have probably seen once we went back to schools, we did bring out that traffic light poster with the different activities, and we of course had to move our annual conference online this year. So there are some of the things that we were doing before Christmas, and then at the moment what we're working on is we're planning to have an information meeting to support the NCCA consultation that you've already spoke about for the preparation of the 135-hour programme for PE at junior cycle. And we're also in the process of developing resources for Leaving Cert PE, so for topic 5 at the moment. So they're being developed by teachers who are currently teaching Leaving Cert PE, and the hope is that this will be a bigger project that maybe will have more resources developed for the other topics down the line as well. So they're kind of two of the main things that we're doing at the moment. And if people, I'm sure there's, like you said, lots of people here are members, but if there's anyone who isn't, I would definitely encourage you to try sign up. I know before Christmas as well, we revamped the resource section on our website. So you can see all the different links there, and our resources are for members only. So it's definitely worthwhile going onto the website there and checking out the resources that we have available.
So Méabh, thank you for that brief piece. I'd love to pose a few more questions there, but it's great to see the messages come in from across the board in terms of just congratulating you and the other 6 teachers that presented this evening. Now we've gone 32 minutes over time, so my apologies everyone, but I hope it was of value to you. Me and the panelists are going to stay on the line for a little while, not to talk, but just maybe to answer some questions that are still coming in. So on behalf of myself, Amy, and all of our panelists this evening, I want to thank you and I want to thank them for their work. There has been significant interactions since last Friday when we were drawing this together. So I know that there's always pressure when you're presenting in front of your peers like this. And I really want to thank all of them and all of you for making this such an engaging, interactive event tonight. So I hope that you stay safe and well over the coming while. You can feel free to leave the meeting at whatever time you want now. And we're going to just maybe spend some time after addressing a number of the questions. So thank you very much and good night.